He left with a suitcase and a smirk, thinking I'd chase him down the driveway crying. I didn't even stand up from the table. From the kitchen window, I watched Jack throw his duffel bag into the back seat, like he was making a dramatic exit in a movie. He looked back once, probably to see if I was at the door begging him to stay. I was not. I was sipping tea, a little too strong and slightly oversteeped, the way I liked it. The front gate clicked shut. His car engine sputtered, coughed, then roared to life, like always, too loud for our quiet neighborhood. And then he was gone. Just like that. 30 years of cohabiting, over in 5 minutes and one slammed door. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was still. I stayed seated, letting my eyes fall on the floral mug in front of me, the one with the tiny chip on the rim. Jack always said it made me look poor, drinking from a broken cup. But I liked that mug. It fit my hands just right. For a long time, I thought I'd break when he finally left. I truly believed I'd fall apart the way people assume old women do, trembling, devastated, directionless. But instead, I reached for the shortbread tin, pulled out a cookie, and enjoyed it in peace. He didn't take much with him. His clothes, his laptop, some toiletries. Not the books he never read or the tools he always said he'd use but never did. He didn't even ask for the spare keys. That told me everything about how confident he felt. He thought he'd hurt me. But Jack never knew how far gone I'd been inside. He never noticed the woman who used to argue back had gone silent, not from surrender, but calculation. That every time I nodded at his insults or handed over my card at the grocery store, I was adding one more thing to the mental list. The list that would one day make walking away not just possible, but inevitable. He also never noticed the name on the bank account. That was the real punchline. I rinsed my mug and placed it in the sink, not bothering to wipe the counter. The house felt different now, lighter, as though it had been holding its breath and could finally exhale. I went into the living room. The armchair still held the indent of his body. He always slouched to the left, remote wedged under his thigh, always annoyed when I sat in the wrong chair. I sat there now, crossed my legs, stared at the ceiling, smiled. The clock ticked. I thought of the way he'd talk to me in front of people, like I was slow, hard of hearing, irrelevant. He'd interrupt, correct me, explain things I already knew. "She gets confused easily," he'd say with a wink. I didn't get confused. I just stopped explaining myself. And I never corrected him when he assumed the savings were shared. I had let him believe what he needed to believe, that he was in charge, that the house was his, that I was lucky to have him. Let him think it. Let him think it right up until the day he packed his bag and said, "You'll regret this, Helen. You think you're strong, but you're not." I didn't say anything in return, just watched his hands tremble slightly as he zipped the bag. That was the part he didn't expect. The silence. The calm. I think he was hoping for drama, that I'd plead or collapse, that he'd get to feel powerful one last time. Instead, he got the back of my head and a pot of tea. The phone rang once, his number, but I didn't answer. I knew what it would be. Some last word. Some manipulative half-apology. I wasn't interested. Instead, I opened my drawer and took out the small red notebook I kept hidden under my sewing patterns. I flipped through the pages, checking off each item with a steady hand. Utilities, switched to my name 2 years ago. Lawyer's letter, signed and filed. House deed, Helen Dowley, sole owner. Bank account, opened 3 years ago, Jack not listed. Will, updated last spring. He thought he'd left me stranded. What he didn't know is that I'd been preparing for this departure longer than he had. And now, For the first time in a decade, I could breathe. People say old ladies cry when men leave them. I didn't cry. I didn't even sigh. Instead, I put the red notebook back in its place and fetched the lemon oil from the cupboard. If Jack wasn't here, I could finally polish the sideboard the way I liked, without hearing about useless old lady habits or obsessing over furniture. He never understood that some of us clean not to impress, but to think. As I rubbed the cloth in slow circles, I thought back to the first time I let Jack move in. We weren't young even then. I was 58, a widow with a paid-off house and a modest teacher's pension. He was 62, twice divorced, and had come to the conclusion, as he liked to say, that he needed a woman with a softer heart. I mistook that for something tender. The truth was, he needed a roof, hot meals, and someone who didn't ask too many questions. He moved in gradually. A drawer here, a toothbrush there. Then his recliner appeared in my living room, like a monument I wasn't allowed to touch. I didn't protest. I thought, everyone needs comfort. But his comfort came at a cost. At first, he was charming. He'd wash dishes, fix the screen door, drive me to the post office. Little gestures, but slowly, they stopped. He forgot how to use the dishwasher, claimed the car made his back ache, told me I was better at errands anyway. I remember the exact day I realized he'd stopped doing anything simply because he cared. We were sitting on the porch. It was late autumn, the kind of day when the trees look like they're holding fire in their hands. I brought him coffee, and he took it without looking up. "You didn't use the hazelnut creamer?" he said, annoyed. I said we were out. He sighed loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Then he added, "You know, it's the small things that make a woman worth staying with." I laughed. I don't think he noticed. After that, things shifted. Not quickly, not dramatically. He never shouted or hit me. He was too clever for that. But the slights stacked up, each one no heavier than a feather, until one day they crushed me all the same. He'd mock my shows, criticize my clothes, dismiss my hobbies. "Who are you knitting for anyway?" he'd say. "No one wants handmade junk anymore." I stopped knitting. Not because I believed him, but because I was tired of hearing it. Then came the money. At first, he said he'd handle the bills. I said no. We compromised. I paid from my account, and he gave me cash. That lasted 2 months. Then he stopped having cash, stopped remembering, started saying, "Can't you just cover it, sweetheart?" That's when I opened the separate account. He never asked to see it. He assumed everything was shared, even though I'd never added his name to anything. I wasn't naive. I'd made that mistake in my first marriage. Charles was kind, but careless. When he died, it took me a year to untangle our accounts. I promised myself I'd never put my name on paper with another man again. So while Jack lounged on the porch and bragged to his son about how he built a life with Helen, I met with the bank manager. Quietly, no drama, no fuss, just business. I moved my pension, redirected my Social Security, set up alerts. A few months later, I changed the utilities to my name only. He hadn't noticed. He wasn't watching. Men like Jack don't look down when they think they're standing on you. I oiled the last drawer and stepped back. The sideboard gleamed. I ran my fingers along its smooth edge. Jack hated that sideboard, called it a dust collector. Said we should sell it, get a TV stand instead. I kept it. Some things aren't negotiable. The phone rang again. "Jack, one more time." I let it go to voicemail. I walked through the house, taking stock. The things he left behind. The silence that filled the corners. I thought I'd be lonely, but what I felt was space. For me, for air, for thought. I looked at the dining room table. Ours for 29 years. He always sat at the head, claimed it gave him a better view of the room. I sat there now. It didn't feel different, just honest. When I opened the curtains, the front yard was bathed in late afternoon light. My neighbor, Mrs. Keller, was tending her begonias. She glanced up, gave a little wave. I waved back. I wondered what she'd say when she noticed Jack's car was gone. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. He thought I'd be lost without him, but I'd already built the map. He called again the next morning, twice before 9. I let both go to voicemail, then turned the phone off entirely. The weather was nice. Mild sun, cool breeze, just enough to dry the laundry without stiffening the sheets. I stood outside with my basket, pinning the wet clothespins one by one, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel watched. Jack always had opinions about laundry. "It's inefficient to hang it," he'd say, even though we had a line out back. "Just use the dryer like normal people." But I liked the rhythm of it. The snap of fabric in wind. The small grace of doing something slowly, deliberately, for no one but yourself. Around noon, I took out the trash and noticed something odd. An envelope sticking out of the mailbox. No stamp, no address. Just my name, in Jack's handwriting. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I made myself a tuna sandwich, cut the crusts, brewed fresh tea. I ate in the quiet, letting the envelope sit on the table like a guest I hadn't invited. After lunch, I opened it. 4 sentences, written in that rushed, jagged scrawl of his. "Helen, let's not be childish. I left to give us both space. I'll be back in a week or 2. We can talk then. Jay." Not a word of apology. Not a trace of regret. Just the arrogance of a man who thought leaving was a tactic, not a decision. I folded the note and slid it into the drawer with the others. This wasn't the first time Jack had gone for a drive to think. Once he disappeared for 4 days without calling, came back with sunburn and the scent of beer on his breath. Claimed he'd visited an old army buddy. I never saw proof of that visit. It used to worry me back then. Now, it was just noise. A man like Jack had never been alone with himself long enough to understand what silence reveals. I doubted he'd last a week wherever he was. Later that afternoon, I heard the tires on gravel. My stomach clenched just slightly, out of habit. But it wasn't Jack. It was his son, Troy. He hadn't changed much. Same 2 white smile, same leather jacket despite the warmth. He used to come around once a year, maybe twice, always around tax season. Jack would act thrilled to see him, but his eyes would flick toward the cabinet where I kept the checkbook. Troy got out of the car holding a 6-pack of light beer and a bouquet of supermarket daisies. "Mrs. D," he called cheerfully. "Surprised to see me?" "Not really." "Your dad's not here," I said, standing on the porch. "Yeah, he mentioned he needed some space," Troy said, offering the flowers like a bribe. "Figured I'd stop by anyway, keep you company." I didn't take the bouquet. "You here for something?" I asked. "Or just practicing your timing?" He grinned, unbothered. "Always liked this place. You've got the best porch in the county." "Is that right?" He followed me into the kitchen without being asked. Sat at the table, cracked open a beer, made himself at home. I let him. Some dances were worth finishing. "You know," he said after a sip, "Dad's been talking about downsizing. Said this house is too much for you two now." That was fast. Jack hadn't been gone 24 hours before the circling began. "Oh, has he?" I kept my tone even. "Yeah," Troy nodded. "Said maybe you two could move into one of those assisted living places. Something easier. And sell this place before the market dips again." He glanced at me, testing. I met his eyes and said nothing. Troy leaned back in his chair. "I got a guy who could help. Real estate's my world now. I could get you a good deal." "Funny," I said. "No one mentioned that to me before." Troy shrugged. "Guess Dad didn't want to worry you. But hey, with the proceeds, you could set yourselves up real nice. New car, maybe even a little trip." The audacity wasn't even offensive. It was boring. "I'll think about it," I said, then stood. "You want to take those flowers back with you?" He blinked. "No, I brought them for you." "I don't like daisies," I said calmly. "Never have." I didn't walk him out. Just turned and started washing the dishes from lunch. When I looked out the window 10 minutes later, his car was gone. That evening, I opened the red notebook again and made a new list. Change locks. Contact lawyer. Move CDs to safe deposit box. Review house deed again. Jack and his son thought they were ahead of me. They thought I was still the woman who smiled politely and handed over checks. They hadn't realized I'd started counting receipts. The day I stopped cooking for him was the day I started breathing again. It wasn't a grand announcement. No slammed pots, no fiery speech. Just a quiet evening, a bowl of vegetable soup, and no second place set on the table. That was 6 months ago. He noticed, of course. "Where's mine?" he asked, standing in the doorway in his too tight flannel shirt, the one with mustard stains he never saw. "In the fridge," I replied, without looking up. "You know where the microwave is?" He laughed. "You mad about something?" "No," I said, spooning soup into my mouth. "Just tired." And that was the truth. Tired of being expected to fill his plate while he filled the room with complaints. Tired of him eating in front of the TV while I cleared dishes in silence. Tired of feeling like a waitress who forgot her name somewhere between the salt shaker and the laundry basket. After that, I stopped doing a lot of things. I stopped reminding him to take his blood pressure pills. I stopped buying his favorite cereal. I stopped refilling the bottle of aftershave he never once thanked me for replacing. He didn't like it. "You're being cold lately," he said one evening, watching me fold laundry. "I'm being quiet," I replied. "There's a difference." He huffed and went out to the porch, where he'd sit and call old friends on speakerphone, loud enough for me to hear every word. I never knew if it was deliberate. I stopped caring. The more I withdrew, the more he tested. Little pokes, snide comments. One day he suggested I should stop wearing my good jewelry around the house. "Someone might think you're showing off." I looked him in the eye and said, "No one's watching but you, Jack." That shut him up for a day or two. I knew what he was doing. He thought if he made me feel small enough, I'd fight back. And in fighting, give him something to argue with. But I didn't argue. I just unhooked, like a coat falling off a peg. And in that space, quiet, unoccupied by his wants, I started breathing again. One afternoon, I drove myself to the bank. Just a routine check-in, I told myself. But the truth was, I wanted to see everything with fresh eyes. I met with Mrs. Candle, the same advisor who'd helped me set up my separate account 3 years back. She looked at me over her glasses. "Still happy with how things are structured, Mrs. Dowley?" "Yes," I said. Then after a pause, "But I'd like to make sure no one else has access. No joint beneficiaries, no transfer on death clauses. Just me." She nodded. We can confirm all that now." She printed out the documents. I read every line, signed again where needed. Before I left, I asked her about safe deposit boxes. She walked me down the hall, showed me one available on the second floor. We stepped into the chilled vault room, and something about the cold steel door made me feel grounded. I rented it on the spot. Back home, I moved the savings bonds, the CD statements, and a velvet pouch with 3 heirloom rings, my mother's and 2 from my grandmother, into a small, fireproof box. I'd let Jack see them once, years ago. He'd said, "We should appraise those. Might be worth something." He didn't mean sentimentally. I didn't tell him I moved them. I didn't need to. That evening, he asked what I wanted for dinner. "I already ate," I replied, even though I hadn't. He stood there for a moment, confused, like the air in the room had shifted and he didn't know where to place himself. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Because in the back of my mind, a new thought had started to take shape. Not fear, not revenge. Something steadier, like the click of a key in the right lock. He thought I was just being moody. He thought it would pass. But what he didn't see, what he never once paused long enough to notice, was that I was no longer afraid of losing him. I was ready. He brought his son around again, and they looked at my house like buyers. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was clipping dead leaves off my potted geraniums on the porch when I heard the gravel crunch under Jack's tires. He hadn't called ahead. He never did. But this time, he didn't come alone. Troy stepped out of the passenger seat, already grinning like the ending was written. "Still standing, huh?" he said, patting the porch railing as if it were his own elbow. Jack followed with a paper bag of grocery store pastries. "Brought some of those cinnamon things you like," he said, handing them to me like an offering. I didn't take them. "They give me heartburn," I said. Troy laughed too hard, like we were all in on a joke. They stayed longer than usual. Jack wandered into the kitchen, opening cabinets like he was checking inventory. Troy hovered behind him, nodding along to everything he said. Good structure. Open floor plan. Natural light. The language of men who think the world owes them a house just for existing. "Mind if I check the backyard?" Troy asked at one point, already halfway out the door. "Go ahead," I said. The weeds are lovely this time of year. They poked around for half an hour. I stayed in the living room, listening. Cabinets opened, doors clicked, drawers shifted. I sat perfectly still, hands folded in my lap, like a hostess at a dinner party she never agreed to throw. When they came back in, Jack's tone had shifted. Faintly businesslike, but trying to stay warm. "You ever think about selling?" he asked casually. "Not seriously." "You know, this house is a lot of work for one person." "I manage." "I mean, just think. What if something happened? The roof's getting old, the water heater's from what, 2002? I looked him square in the eye. "Jack, did you come here to check on me or to appraise the property?" He blinked, caught for a second. "I just worry." "No, you speculate." Troy cut in with a smile. "Look, Mrs. D, no pressure. But the market's good. My firm could get you a real deal, maybe even cash buyers. You could move somewhere easier, nicer." "And who'd get this place?" I asked. "You?" Silence. "I see," I said, standing. Jack tried to recover. "Nobody's saying that. Hell, you've lived here how long? 40 years? 43. Right. Maybe it's time to start thinking ahead." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "I already have." They left not long after. Jack said he'd call. Troy muttered something about emailing me a few light listings. I nodded as if I might read them. The moment their car pulled away, I locked the door and went to my bedroom. Inside the closet was a fireproof box. I pulled it down, took out the folder marked property, and opened it flat across the bed. There it was, in black ink. The deed. My name only. No Jack, no Troy. I'd signed it that way on purpose years ago, after a conversation with my lawyer, an older woman who'd once looked me in the eye and said, "Helen, love does not entitle a man to your assets." Smart woman. Still, I wanted more certainty. So I called her. Her assistant answered, said she could see me Wednesday. "No rush," I said, "but I want to update a few things." "Same address, same file?" "Yes, but tell her I'd like to make it airtight this time." That night, I barely slept. Not because of fear, but because of clarity. For years, I'd let Jack drift in and out of this house like it was a given, like my home, my peace, my name on the papers didn't count. But now he was bringing people through like a man testing the soil before he plants a flag. And Troy, God help me, Troy looked around this place like he already had paint samples in his head. I opened the notebook. New entry. Add survivorship clause. Consider living trust. Send copies to Beth, my niece. Review emergency contacts. It's funny how quiet a house gets when you finally stop lying to yourself. I went to the bank that morning. Quietly. No one saw me leave. Jack wasn't around to ask where I was going, and even if he had been, I would have said something vague like, "I'm picking up stamps." That was one of the luxuries of age. No one expected you to move with purpose. But I was moving with more purpose than I had in years. My appointment was at 9:30. I wore a gray skirt and a navy blouse, clothes Jack called funeral librarian outfits, but I liked how they made me feel. Calm, neutral, untouchable. The bank manager, Mrs. Condell, greeted me with the same soft professionalism I'd come to appreciate. She didn't ask about Jack. She didn't make conversation. She just ushered me into her office and pulled up my file. "How can I help today, Mrs. Dowley?" I opened my bag and took out a small manila folder. "I want to transfer some funds," I said, "and make sure they're shielded. Completely." She nodded without blinking. "Shielded from whom?" "My partner," I said. "Not legally married, not on any account, but nosy." "Understood." She typed a few things, then printed out 3 forms. "Your retirement is already separate," she explained. "Your investment account, too. But the main checking and savings, those are linked to the household address. If we transfer them to a private client division and flag them as individual, there'll be no statements mailed home, no paper trail, just secure online access." "Good," I said. "Do it." "And do you want to assign a beneficiary?" "Yes, my niece, Beth Langley." She wrote it down. "Anyone else?" "No one else." It took 20 minutes, a few signatures, a new card ordered. She handed me a set of temporary checks and a business card with her direct line. "Anything changes, call me first." I looked her in the eye. "Thank you." "You're not the first," she said gently, "and you're not alone." I walked out of that bank feeling like a woman who had finally stopped asking for permission to live her own life. The air smelled like cut grass and car exhaust. I stopped at the bakery across the street and bought myself a warm roll. No reason, just because I could. Back home, I placed the roll on a plate, made tea, and sat on the porch. From there, I could see the driveway. Still empty. Still mine. Jack had been gone 5 days now. He hadn't tried to come back, but he was calling, leaving voicemails. First polite, then urgent, then quiet again. I didn't listen to any of them. Instead, I opened the envelope from the lawyer. Everything was in motion now, the deed reaffirmed in my name. A revocation of cohabitation privileges, drafted, blunt, perhaps, but legally solid. A trust was being prepared. Beth would be the executor, not because she was family, but because she listened. At 4, I called the locksmith. He arrived the next morning, polite and fast. Changed all 3 locks, front, side, and garage. When he asked if I wanted a copy made for anyone else, I said no. Just the 2 in my purse, and the 3rd for the lockbox. That night, I slept with the windows open. The silence was different now. Not the hollow silence of something missing, but the deep, rich quiet of something finished. The kind that lets you rest. Jack had always said I was the kind of woman who'd fall apart if left alone. I didn't fall apart. I fell into place. He left some papers on the table, folded neatly, clipped together, like it was just mail he forgot to sort. I noticed them the moment I walked into the kitchen. 3 pages, no envelope, resting next to the salt shaker like they belonged there. Jack's handwriting was scrawled across a post-it. Sign these when you have a minute. Just routine. Routine. That was the word he always used when something wasn't. I sat down. Didn't touch the papers right away. Just looked at them while the kettle hummed on the stove. The corner of the top page had a familiar letterhead. Sunhaven Title and Escrow. The name of a local firm. He hadn't even tried to hide it. I made my tea, let it steep too long, sat back down, then read. Page 1. Authorization to initiate discussions about co-ownership transfer. Page 2. A preliminary agreement outlining intent to mutually retitle residential property for asset simplification. Page 3. A disclosure form. He hadn't signed any of them yet. He wanted me to go first. That was clever in a lazy kind of way. I folded them back together and set them aside. I didn't get angry, didn't curse. Just stared at the steam rising from my cup and thought, so this is what he came back for. It had been a week since he'd left. No bags, no announcement. Just one afternoon, I came back from the post office, and there he was in the living room, shoes kicked off, watching the news like nothing had happened. You're back, I'd said. Wasn't gone that long, he said. Needed air. Things got tense. That was his version of an apology, and I let it sit. I nodded. I didn't welcome him, but I didn't throw him out either. I needed time to see where the wind was blowing. Turns out it was blowing straight toward my deed. Later that evening, after he'd gone out to get milk and returned 3 hours later without it, I placed the papers in an empty manila envelope and wrote across the front, "Return to sender." The next morning, I left it on his pillow. He didn't mention it for 2 days. Then over breakfast, he said, "You get a chance to look at those forms?" I wiped my mouth with a napkin. I did. And the answer is no. He stared at me like he didn't understand the word, like it was new. No? That's right. He shifted in his chair. Helen, it's not a big deal. It's just about future planning. No, I said again, calmly. It's about control. And the answer is still no. You're being paranoid. No, Jack, I'm being awake. He stood, pushing his chair back too hard. You think I'm trying to steal from you? I sipped my tea. I think you're trying to rewrite something that's already settled. And I think you're not used to hearing me say no. He stared at me, jaw tight, fists half curled like he wanted to hit something but couldn't find a reason. This is what I get for trying to help. I didn't reply. He stormed out of the kitchen, muttering something about ungrateful old women. The door slammed. Again. I waited. 10 seconds. Then 20. Then I exhaled. Later, I checked the cameras. 2 months ago, I'd had a neighbor's son install a basic system. Front door, garage, side yard. Jack never noticed the little black eye near the porch light. At noon, I watched the playback. He'd gone straight to his car, opened the trunk, pulled out a second folder. Stood for a moment like he couldn't decide whether to come back. Then he drove off. I opened the red notebook again. Cameras, working. Deed, confirmed. Lawyer, notified. Jack, no longer underestimated. He thought he could outweight me, wear me down. But he didn't understand something essential about women like me. We're not quiet because we're weak. We're quiet because we're preparing. He mocked my old clothes in front of the cashier. It was a Tuesday. We were picking up groceries. Not together exactly, but in the same car. Jack insisted on coming along because he wanted to get a few things, which usually meant adding junk to my cart and pretending it was his money paying for it. I hadn't planned to run into anyone. I was wearing a soft cotton dress, the blue one with a faded hem I usually saved for yard work. Comfortable, familiar, nothing special. At the checkout, the cashier, a young girl with heavy eyeliner and chipped nail polish, smiled at me and said, "I like your dress. It's cute." I smiled back. "It's older than you are." Jack laughed. Then, loud enough for the people in the next lane to hear, he said, "She refuses to buy new clothes. Sentimental about her antique collection." The girl looked confused. I looked down at the apples rolling across the counter. He didn't stop. "She's got 3 closets full of stuff from the Eisenhower years. I keep telling her you're not a museum exhibit." The smile froze on my face. I didn't answer, didn't look at him, just waited for the total, paid in cash, and walked the cart outside. He followed, carrying nothing. When we got to the car, I unlocked the trunk, set the bags down gently, then closed it and turned to him. "Do you feel better?" I asked. "What?" "You embarrassed me in front of a 19-year-old. Did it feel good?" "Oh, come on, Helen," he said, rolling his eyes. "It was a joke." "No," I said calmly. "A joke requires someone to laugh." He scoffed. "You're too sensitive." "No, Jack, you're too loud." The ride home was silent. He didn't apologize. I didn't ask. But something inside me tilted, permanently. That night, I went to my study. There's a drawer in my desk where I keep all the important things: birth certificate, tax returns, and a folder marked "legal," underlined in red. I pulled it out and took inventory. My current will was 4 years old. Simple. Clear. Everything to be divided equally between Beth and the local animal shelter. Jack was mentioned only once, as a temporary caretaker of the house if I passed before selling it. That clause had been written in a gentler time. I took out a pen, scribbled a note. Then the next morning I called my lawyer. "Change of plans," I said. "I want him removed entirely, not as executor. Not as temporary anything." "Understood," she replied. "And I want the house to go directly into a living trust, effective immediately. He doesn't live here full time. He's not on the deed. I don't want him able to make a single decision about this property if I'm gone." "Very well. One more thing," I added. "Can we add a clause? Something petty but legal?" She laughed. "Like what?" "Like a stipulation that he may not enter the property after my death unless Beth is present, or unless he's here to collect a single pre-approved box of personal belongings. Nothing more." "Doable." "Good. Let's do that." That afternoon, I pulled the blue dress from the laundry basket, washed it by hand, let it dry on the line, then folded it gently and placed it at the back of the closet. Not because I was ashamed of it, but because I didn't need to wear it again. I had made my point. To him and to myself. He thought I was still the woman who would smooth over every moment, who would laugh nervously when he insulted me, who would say, "It's fine, Jack, it doesn't matter." But it does. Words matter. So do the small cuts we carry for years, and sometimes the sharpest answer is silence. He booked a cruise with my money. I canceled it before he packed. It was a Friday. Jack had been walking around with that peculiar mix of smugness and fake humility, the kind of mood that always meant he was up to something. He hummed in the mornings, was oddly polite, made coffee, even brought me a cup without being asked. I didn't drink it. By lunch, he'd left his laptop open on the kitchen counter. Not a habit of his. Jack guarded that thing like a banker guarding a vault. But this time, he left it in plain view, unlocked, almost like an invitation. I wasn't snooping. Not really. But I walked by and saw it on the screen. Confirmation email. "Thank you for booking with Grand Horizon Cruises." My name was listed first. Mrs. Helen Dowley, then his. 8 nights. Balcony suite. Departing in 6 weeks. Non-refundable. Paid in full. I opened the details. The payment had been made from a card he didn't own, because Jack didn't have a card. Not in his name. Not with that limit. He'd used mine. I walked away. Slowly. Boiled water. Made tea. Sat down in the den and breathed. Then I got up, fetched my red notebook, and found the bank card I kept in the back pocket, wrapped in an elastic band. My personal card, the one I rarely used in front of him. I called the number on the back. "Grand Horizon Cruises, how may I assist you?" "I need to cancel a booking," I said. It was made without my authorization. The woman was polite, then confused, then understanding. I explained it calmly. No raised voice, just facts. "Yes, we can cancel," she said. "But there may be a partial fee." "I understand." 10 minutes later, the reservation was gone. The money would be refunded in 5 to 7 business days, back into my account, not his. That evening, Jack walked in holding a brochure. He laid it on the table like a magician presenting the final card. "I did something nice for us," he said, smiling. "Look inside." I didn't move. "I booked that cruise you mentioned," he continued. "You've been stressed. I figured we could use a break, just the two of us." He made it sound like a gift. I looked him in the eye. "It's canceled." His smile faltered. "What?" "The booking. I canceled it." "You? Why would you? How?" "You used my money, Jack." "Without asking?" "It was for us." "No, it was for you. If it were for us, you'd have asked." He raised his hands, defensive. "Come on, Helen. It's not like I drained your savings. It was one trip. Without my permission. I thought you'd be happy. I thought you'd have boundaries." He grabbed the brochure, crumpled it. "You're unbelievable." "No, Jack. I'm awake." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard it rattled the pictures on the wall. I sat perfectly still. Outside, a storm was rolling in. The wind picked up. Leaves swirled across the porch. I could hear thunder in the distance. I poured myself another cup of tea. That night, I changed all my online passwords. Every last one. Banking, email, utilities, my phone account, the Wi-Fi. The last thing I did before bed was pull the key from under the planter on the porch and throw it into the trash. He didn't need access anymore, and I didn't need a vacation. I already had one. A life without him. He slammed the door, said, "You'll regret this." I smiled. He meant it as a final word. something sharp to throw behind him like a match tossed onto dry grass. But nothing caught fire. I just stood in the hallway, holding the dish towel I'd been folding, and watched the door swing shut. It was quiet afterward. Not sad, not sudden, just quiet. Jack had stormed out plenty of times before. To the bar, to his son's place, once to a motel an hour out of town, claiming he needed air after I asked him not to insult my cooking in front of company. But this time felt different. He'd packed a bag. Not his usual overnight duffel, but the large black suitcase with the broken wheel. The one he only used when he planned to stay gone long enough to need clean socks. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't ask if I needed anything. He just spat out that little curse, like a curse from a man who thought absence would teach me a lesson. I heard the car door slam, the engine cough, then fade into the distance. I didn't go to the window. I turned back into the kitchen, rinsed my hands, and made tea. I chose the good mug, the one with the painted violets and the faint chip on the rim. The one Jack always said looked cheap. I carried my cup to the back porch and sat in the glider. It was late afternoon, the sun already sliding low over the fence line. A breeze moved through the trees. The same breeze that used to carry the sound of his voice when he was on the phone out here, complaining to whoever would listen. Now it just carried birdsong. And my breath. I looked around at my yard. Nothing grand. Just a patch of grass, 2 crepe myrtles, and the rusted wind chimes he hated. He once said they sounded like regret. I always thought they sounded like weather you could trust. I sipped my tea, thought of nothing, or maybe everything. The groceries were put away, the house was clean, the silence wasn't heavy, it was earned. He'd left thinking I'd panic, that I'd call, that I'd beg him to come back and explain. But I'd already had that conversation with myself. I'd had it every night for the past year. Every time I'd sat through his silence, his cold shoulder, his little criticisms disguised as concern. Every time he'd referred to me as the old lady at the hardware store. Every time he'd said, "You'd fall apart without me." He was wrong. I didn't fall apart. I fell into rhythm. An hour passed, maybe 2. I refilled my cup, watered the ferns, wrote a short note in my red notebook. Jack gone. Left 3:42 p.m. No forwarding address. None requested. When the sun dipped behind the trees, I turned on the porch light and went inside. I made myself a simple dinner. Toast, scrambled eggs, a tomato sliced with salt and pepper. I sat at the table with no second place set. I didn't light a candle. I didn't need ceremony. After the dishes, I opened the hall closet. Inside was the little suitcase I used when I visited Beth. I brought it to my bedroom and started packing, not to leave, but to clear space. Every drawer Jack had used, emptied. Every item folded, bagged, placed by the front door. I didn't throw anything out. I just moved it all to a box. One single box. His shirts, his razor, his second pair of shoes, his prescription bottle he always left in the cabinet, like I was supposed to remember it. In the morning, I'd leave it outside. If he came back for it, fine. If not, the donation truck was coming Wednesday. Either way, it wouldn't stay here. That night, I slept on my side of the bed. All of it was mine now. He came back 3 days later, with a story. I heard the car before I saw it. Same old engine rattle. Same too fast turn into the driveway. I was in the garden, cutting back the hydrangeas. The shears paused in my hand when I heard the door slam. He didn't knock, just walked in like always, keys jingling, voice raised. "Helen?" I didn't answer. He stepped into the backyard, holding his phone in one hand and a half-wrinkled shopping bag in the other. I brought those ginger biscuits you like, the kind from that place in Cressling. I stood slowly, wiped my hands on my apron. The sun was warm on my back. I didn't say a word. He looked tired, or maybe just unshaven. There was a scuff on his cheek and a sweat stain down the middle of his shirt. He smiled, forced. Thought I'd come by. Talk? Clear the air. I looked at the bag, then at him. You didn't bring milk this time either. He chuckled weakly. Fair enough. Look, I've been thinking. Things got heated, sure. But we've been through worse, haven't we? No, Jack, I said. We haven't. He blinked. You mean to tell me you're still mad about the cruise? No, I said. I'm finished being mad. That's the difference. He sat on the edge of the porch, like he used to do when he wanted to look casual. But I could see the tension in his shoulders. He wasn't here for an apology. He was here to reset the clock. Look, he said, I know I've been hard to live with. I'm not perfect. But we've got history. And you're not exactly easy either, you know. I nodded once. That's true. He perked up at that. You've changed, Helen. You've been cold. You used to laugh more. What happened to that woman who used to sing in the kitchen? She stopped singing the day someone told her she sounded like a ghost. He shifted uncomfortably. I didn't mean that. But you said it. He stood now, gesturing, like he was giving a speech. You're going to throw all this away? Over what? Hurt feelings? A canceled cruise? Some paperwork you didn't like? I looked at him. Not angry, not sad, just steady. You're not the problem, Jack, I said. You're the pattern. What the hell does that mean? It means I've lived this life before. Once with a smile, once with silence, but never with peace. And I'm too old to repeat it again just because someone's afraid of being alone. He stared at me, eyes narrowing. You'll regret this, he said again, but it sounded thinner this time. More like a habit than a warning. No, I said. I won't. He stepped forward. This is my home, too. It's not, I said quietly. It never was. You just lived in it. That landed. His mouth opened, then closed. You're going to die alone in this house, Helen. I shook my head. No, I'm going to live alone. That's different. He stared at me for another long moment. Then he turned, walked to the car, and drove away without slamming the door this time. I waited until the sound disappeared completely. Then I went inside, opened the fridge, and put the ginger biscuits straight into the trash. His son left a letter in my mailbox. I didn't open it. It came 2 mornings after Jack's second departure. I was out early, pruning the roses before the sun got too high. When I walked back up the path, I saw the envelope. Plain white, name written in bold marker, my full name in that same cocky block handwriting Troy had used on a birthday card years ago. To Mrs. Helen Dowley. No stamp, no return address. Just delivered by hand, like a favor or a threat. I stood there for a moment, thumb on the flap. Then I set it on the kitchen table and made my tea. It stayed there all day. Mid-morning, I vacuumed. Afternoon, I worked on the quilt I'd neglected for 6 months. Around 3, I went for a short walk around the block, just far enough to feel air on my skin and remember I had legs meant for walking without purpose. The envelope waited. Still unopened. I didn't need to read it. I already knew the script. Troy had always been Jack's echo, louder and with fewer filters. If Jack wanted to manipulate, Troy came to pressure. He'd done it with charm before, bringing cheap flowers, exaggerated concern, leaning on the word we like it held history. We're just worried about you. We want what's best. We can help. But I knew what help meant to them. It meant give us what we think is ours. At dinner time, I moved the envelope to the hall table. By bedtime, I dropped it into the fireproof box without breaking the seal. Let the words stay unread. They had nothing I needed. That night, I sat in the living room with only one lamp on, the same way I had for years. Jack used to say I kept the place too dim. "You're not running a séance," he'd joke. But I liked the soft light. It made the walls feel close in a good way. I opened my red notebook. Envelope from Troy, discarded, unread. No contact from Jack, 48 hours. House quiet. Me, steady. Then I wrote one more line and underlined it. Do not negotiate with people who think your peace is negotiable. The next day, I took out the trash. The box with Jack's belongings had been on the porch for nearly a week, untouched. I carried it to the edge of the sidewalk and set it beside the bins. Donation pickup was due by 10. At 9:15, a blue truck pulled up. Same driver as last time. He nodded, smiled, lifted the box. "House clean out?" he asked. "Something like that," I said. He loaded it gently. When he left, I stood there a minute longer. Nothing dramatic. Just me, the sidewalk, and an open porch. No ghosts. No echoes. Just space. Later, I walked down the hallway and opened the closet that used to be Jack's. Empty now. I'd wiped down the shelves, vacuumed the floor. No scent left, no straggling sock. Just pine wood and silence. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like returned rent. That evening, I got a call from Beth. "Hey, Auntie," she said. "Just checking on you." "I'm fine," I said. And I meant it. There was a pause. "I got the updated paperwork from your lawyer. Everything's in place." "Good. You want me to stop by this weekend? Bring muffins? I promise not to talk about work." "Come Sunday," I said. "Bring the ones with walnuts." "You got it." We hung up. I sat on the porch again, hands in my lap, wind brushing the hem of my pants. Somewhere down the street, wind chimes rang. Someone else's, not mine. Jack always hated mine. I hadn't noticed when they stopped. Maybe the string had snapped. Maybe the wind just hadn't been right. Either way, I didn't need them now. The quiet said everything. On Sunday, I set the table for two. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. Beth arrived just before noon, holding a paper bag and a vase of marigolds. "You said walnuts," she smiled. "But I added cinnamon. Hope that's not a crime." She kissed my cheek like always, breezed into the kitchen, and made herself at home. I liked that about her. She never lingered in doorways like she was waiting for permission. While she poured the tea, I laid out 2 plates, 2 napkins, and the good butter. Jack used to hate that butter. "Too salty," he'd say, scraping it off his toast. I used it generously now. We sat at the table, just the two of us, in the morning light. "You changed something," she said, looking around. "No, something left." She nodded. "Didn't press." Beth never asked questions that felt like demands. We ate quietly for a while. Muffins soft and warm, tea a little strong. Outside, the leaves were starting to shift. First hints of orange and dull red. I loved this time of year. The beginning of shedding, of letting go without fanfare. She helped with dishes, wiped the counter, then sat back down with her tea. "I've been thinking," she said. "Careful," I said. "That's how trouble starts." She grinned. "You know how I do design work for those community centers?" "Yes." "Well, there's a program for women over 60. They're looking for guest speakers. Nothing formal, Just small talks, stories, experiences. I looked at her. You think I should tell strangers how to get rid of freeloading men? She laughed, nearly snorted her tea. I think you've lived through things most people are too polite to talk about. And I think some of those women would feel less alone if they heard your voice. I didn't answer right away. She didn't push. When she left, I walked her to the car, the vase of marigolds already brightening the front window. She waved from the driver's seat, hand steady, eyes soft. Back inside, the house didn't feel empty. It felt open. I went to the closet and pulled out a box I hadn't touched in years. Old photo albums, letters, scraps of paper with recipes in my mother's handwriting. I sifted through them without rushing. Some photos made me laugh. Some I set aside. Some I placed gently in a new album labeled Mine. Not us. Not family. Not Dowley. Just mine. That evening, I roasted potatoes and cooked a small piece of salmon. I lit a candle, not for atmosphere, but because I liked the flicker. The dog across the street barked once, then settled. The clock ticked steadily. After dinner, I opened a fresh page in my notebook. Beth visit. Good. House, stable. Me. Ready? Then in smaller letters. I am not waiting for anything to change. I have already changed. I underlined it twice. When I went to bed that night, I slept without dreams. Not because there was nothing left to want, but because I no longer needed wanting to fill the silence. The letter came on a Thursday, postmarked from 2 towns over. Handwritten. Jack hadn't written to me in 30 years. Not even in the early days, when I was the one traveling to see my sister, and he was trying to play the patient man. Back then, he left voicemails. Short, clipped, impatient. But now, after everything, he wrote. The envelope was off-white, thick, his handwriting unmistakable. Slanted slightly left, like a man leaning away from what he's saying. It sat on the hall table all morning. I dusted the bookshelves, took a walk, made soup. The envelope stayed where it was. Around 3 I made a cup of tea, took the letter out to the porch, and opened it with the same care I'd give to peeling a bruise from a piece of fruit. He started without greeting. I suppose you think you've won, that you've made your point. Maybe you have. I don't know anymore. I paused, exhaled. It's not easy, being shut out. I keep wondering if you told everyone already. Beth, your neighbors, that lawyer friend of yours. Maybe you all laugh about it behind my back. Maybe you sit around and talk about how clever you were. But I keep thinking about the porch. About how you used to bring me coffee without asking. About the sideboard you refused to sell. About that stupid old movie you liked. The one with the girl who runs off in the rain. I didn't understand you. That's true. Maybe I didn't even try. I folded the letter there. Not because I was angry, but because I already knew what came next. Regret dressed as sentiment. Apology dressed as nostalgia. Loneliness dressed as love. I opened it again. I've been staying at Troy's. It's not ideal. He talks too much. His wife hates me. I don't belong here. I think about coming back, but I know you'd lock the door. Maybe you already have. So this is my last note. If you ever decide you want to talk, you know where to find me. If not, well, I guess that's that. I left my copy of The Guns of August in the closet. If you still have it, maybe send it along. Or don't. No closing, no signature. Just the indentation of his hand where he'd pressed too hard on the last line. I folded the letter, took it inside, and laid it gently in the fireproof box. Not out of care, but out of finality. It didn't belong in the trash, but it didn't belong on my desk either. Later, I found the book. bottom shelf where I'd moved it months ago while clearing space. Thick, dust-covered, heavy with the false weight of things men think define them. I considered mailing it. Instead, I wrapped it in plain brown paper and drove to the local donation bin behind the gas station. Dropped it in. No note. That evening, I wrote one sentence in my notebook. I don't hate him. Then another. But I will never invite him in again. There was no triumph in that. Just stillness. The kind that comes after the storm has passed, not with sunshine, but with air that finally holds still. I made toast for dinner. Opened a book I hadn't read in years. Lit the good candle. Let the quiet return, not as a defense, but as a guest I finally welcomed. It's been 41 days since Jack left for the last time. The house has stopped remembering him. It's a strange thing, what silence becomes when it's not being used as a punishment, when it's not tense or weaponized or waiting for something. Now it just lives here, like a cat that finally found a sunny patch of floor and doesn't want anything but to stay warm. I wake up when I want. The clocks still tick. The pipes still hum in the morning. The trees still scrape the side of the house when the wind shifts. Everything is the same, except that it breathes easier. Some days I rearrange the furniture, just slightly. I moved the armchair from the corner near the TV to the window where the light falls better. I took the heavy curtains down, put up linen ones, pale and soft. Jack always said they were impractical. Now they flutter like thoughts too gentle to speak aloud. The red notebook is almost full. One of the last pages says, "Locks changed. Deed secured. Account protected. Life reclaimed." Underneath in smaller letters, "I did not survive. I rebuilt." Beth visits most Sundays. We talk about real things and stupid things and make sandwiches with too much mayonnaise. She brings her dog sometimes, a shaggy thing with anxious eyes and too much energy. Jack hated dogs. The dog sits at my feet now while I write this. He seems to understand something about quiet, too. A few days ago, I opened a new savings account. Not because I needed it, but because I liked the idea of creating something with no one else's name on it. I named it Window Fund. Maybe I'll fix the porch windows in the spring. Maybe I'll go to the ocean. Not to run, just to sit. Last night, I went out after dark. No jacket, just a shawl. The sky was clear, full of stars. The kind of night that used to make me feel small. But I didn't feel small. I felt placed. Like someone finally sitting in the right chair after standing too long. I stood in the yard for a long time, listening. No cars, no arguments, no door slams. Just the sound of the wind. And one quiet sentence that came to me, clear as a bell. He thought I'd cry when he left, but I didn't cry. I smiled, not because I won, not because he lost, but because I finally understood something most people never do. Leaving is not the hardest part. Staying gone is, and I did. If you've read this far, maybe you needed to hear it. Maybe you know someone like Jack. Maybe you've sat at a kitchen table and wondered if the silence was your fault. Maybe you've looked at your own hands and thought, this isn't the life I meant to live. It's not too late. You don't need a storm. You don't need permission. You just need one quiet, steady decision. If this story meant something to you, share it. Leave a comment. Tell someone. Or tell no one. Just promise yourself one thing. Don't wait for the door to slam to start your life.